now we are in this big push for Medicaid reimbursement for doulas. And in one way, right, the beauty of it is that people who have Medicaid in certain states are now able to get doula care for free. Welcome to the Found Free podcast. I'm your host, Sabia Wade. Here we talk about everything from spirituality to liberation to activism and business, all centering collective liberation. So as your host, I'm a doula, and I'm also the CEO of Birthing Advocacy Doula Trainings, as well as For the Village, Inc. I'm also an author and many other different things. Next, I want to talk about what this episode is going to focus on. So in this world as a doula, I've been doula for about 10 years. And over the last 10 years, I've seen this industry take some changes. So I really wanted to focus this conversation on where we've been, where we're going, and where we need to pay attention to, or what we need to pay attention to. So what is a doula? When we think about doulas, well, most of us actually don't know what a doula is or haven't even heard the word doula. But we think about midwives often. So midwives are the people that are very, very important to this process. Midwives are, in a simple way, the person who takes care of the medical understandings of birth. So they're the ones who are making sure that parent is okay, that baby is okay, that everyone's heart rate is doing well, that anything that can go wrong doesn't go wrong. And if it does go wrong, they have the skill sets to help us come to a better outcome. Doulas are a little bit different. So what we do is we aim to work with a birthing person from the beginning of their process to not the end, because, childhood is 18 years, but at least from prenatal to the first year of birth. So what do we do in between that time? So in the prenatal stage, we may be someone that's helping you understand nutrition, helping you move through the emotional parts of becoming a parent. We may be someone, especially community doulas, we may be someone helping you to find a home. Honestly, it can go to any type of direction. In a birth process, we are infamous for being there during the birth. So we attend everything from water births, which are my personal favorite, but also we are also there for hospital births or anything in between. I always tell my clients, like, if you want to birth from a tree, I'm going to be there at the tree. What we got to do. Then we also do postpartum. So postpartum is more so checking in with you, like if you have goals of lactation, if you have mental health things that you want to work on, if you have parenting questions, if newborns are complicated. So we're there to hold you through that whole process. Other ways that we help people that maybe people aren't as aware of is through like abortion, surrogacy, adoption, anything that's going to come through the process of wanting to have a child, we're there. So in 2015, I started off as a doula. I was actually in the medical field before that. I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I thought I wanted to be like a neonatologist. I thought I wanted to be a few things, but I always centered helping people. And at the time, I thought it would have to be in the hospital system. So I moved into being a nursing assistant. And if anybody knows what a nursing assistant is, it's kind of like the helper or any type of like hospital space or nursing home. The point is, I dealt with a lot of poop. I dealt with a lot of poop. I dealt with a lot of cleaning. I dealt with a lot of blood. Anything that you could think of, I was there. So at that time, I was kind of questioning for myself, like, is this the path I want to go? And that question became even more of a question when I started working in Philadelphia. So I'm from Jersey originally. In Jersey, I was working at a hospital, and it was kind of like, the area was kind of like an upper class hospital. And so I experienced some things there for sure because I was Black. So I experienced some racism there, but ultimately I experienced like understanding the depth as which I wanted to help people. I understood that my gift was sitting with people in transition. My gift was moving with people and their vulnerability. My gift was empowering people, right? Because when you're coming in, let's say you had a stroke and you're not able to walk, and I'm able to just encourage you to move your hand a little bit, move your leg a little bit. Like, that was like my thing. So when I moved to Philadelphia, because I'm a Sagittarius, I love travel, I love moving. I've lived in several different states. It was a difference. I realized that there was a racial difference in how, sometimes, like, yes, how clients are being treated because of their race, but more so I realized that there was a difference between access. So I would have clients who, especially were Black like myself, who were diabetic, who were getting amputations, who were getting like diabetic complications. And when I would talk to them about things like, well, what are you eating when you're at home, or what do you do? They just, it was like they didn't, it was a lack of knowledge. It was a lack of knowledge. And then I realized that that lack of knowledge also kind of centered, at the time, living in Philadelphia, a lot of my clients who were Black, who lived in North Philly or sometimes South Philly, were also people who were living in food deserts, right? Spaces where there isn't fresh vegetables available, or there isn't a grocery store that's, you know, that's full of everything that someone would need to maintain their health. So then I started questioning, like, in this hospital space, are we actually helping people? Like, yes, they're coming in with a sickness or complication. And I also worked on, like, the brain unit. I worked with people that had gunshot wounds. I worked with people that, all different types of things. I was like, are we actually helping them? And my question just became deeper and deeper and deeper as I stayed as a nursing assistant. I started to learn more about the back end. So, for example, as a nursing assistant in the last hospital I worked at, we would have 10 patients for a 12-hour shift. And I'm like, 10 patients? That's a lot of people. Like, I'm trying to, like, navigate room 1 and then navigate to room 2, to room 2 and navigate to room 4. And room 4 is having a really traumatic experience and they're not able to walk and they need a certain level of care. And room 1 maybe is walking, but maybe they have a mental health complication that's making it a little bit dangerous for them to be by themselves. But I will often see, in my personal opinion, where, like, that stuff didn't matter. It just didn't matter. So as I was navigating being young in Philadelphia, it was like, well, let me pause. Philadelphia has the most amazing, like, Black artists, care work, like, power to the people, like scene that I ever have experienced. And I would call that my second home. And as I was in that scene and I was navigating the artist scene and just going to, like, all types of events and experiencing different people, I heard this word doula. And I was like, what is that? Like, I never heard of a doula. What? And I had been in the medical field at this point for, I don't know, probably like 6 years maybe. And I was like, I've never heard of a doula. So started kind of connecting to doulas, started doing my own research about doulas. And I learned about us being these non-medical support people that kind of fill in the gaps that especially Western medical systems don't have. So being able to go to someone's home and sit with them for 2 hours and educate them about not only, like, oh, you're having a baby, but saying to them, like, do you know what that actually means? Do you know what that actually looks like? Do you know what to expect at the different stages of labor? Asking questions around, like, you know, do you have care for your other kids while you're having your baby? Do you have enough food in your household? Do you have any mental health issues that I can get you a resource for? All these things were things that I didn't see as present in the healthcare system. So long story less long, I was like, well, I want to be a doula. I was like, I want to be a doula. I didn't know how. I didn't know what. I didn't know how I was going to figure it out. But I was like, I want to be a doula. So in my personal life at the time, I was in a relationship. It was a terrible relationship, child. I was living my little baby queer life. It was not a great relationship. But I knew that I needed to figure out if this relationship was going to be, I was in at that point for like 5 years or so. I was like, I need to figure out, like, if this is going to work. So she was living in Massachusetts. So I said to myself, you know, I'm in my 20s, my early 20s. I'm like, I'm moving to Massachusetts. I'm doing that. But what was important to me was that, because in my head, I knew it probably wasn't going to work out. So I was like, let me find something that is in alignment with what I want to do outside of this relationship. So I looked at doula programs. I found one called the Prison Birth Project. And when I found the Prison Birth Project, I was like, this is what I want to do. So the Prison Birth Project focused on incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks at the intersection of substance use. So I had at that time, no experience with substance use or at least none that I could formally say that I had. And I also didn't have any experience with pregnancy. I never experienced someone being pregnant. So release, being at the birth. And so I was like, I'm just going to do that. So I hit them up the first time and they were like, oh, we're not currently looking for volunteers. And I was like, okay, sure. Because even if you tell me now, I'm still going to say whatever and I'm going to try again. So then about 2 weeks later, I hit them up again and I was like, are you looking for volunteers yet? And they were like, yeah, we are. So I told my best friend Brittany, I was like, I want to move to Massachusetts. I was like, you coming or no? And she was like, I'm coming. So we did the move up to Massachusetts. I started going and attending meetings, started getting trained as a doula. And in that program, we also actually went into the prison on Wednesdays and did childbirth education courses. So our childbirth education did not look like a traditional childbirth education. It wasn't like at month 4, expect this. It was mixed with our clients are incarcerated. So in Massachusetts at the time, they were just implementing the no shackle law. So that meant that anyone that was pregnant could not be shackled. And we, as doulas coming into the space, working with our clients who were pregnant, would sometimes hear about people being shackled. So we would have conversations about that. We would have conversations about have you seen your other children? Have you talked to your social worker? Have you been able to get into the rehab center that you're aiming to get into? It was way more in depth than what we think of in a white picket fence, a baby's on the way, that kind of thing. In the Prison Birth Project, I learned about reproductive justice. I learned about how everything is connected to everything, right? The water we drink is going to impact the way that our generations exist. The resources that we have. I learned about survival crime. Because many times people think about, people first of all don't think about people being pregnant and being incarcerated. That's number one. But number two, they don't think about what does that actually mean? Where are they going to birth their child? And, people don't know that oftentimes when someone has a vaginal birth in the hospital, in the prison system, they usually go to a hospital that's off-site or, off-site. And then within 24 hours, maybe 40, if they're lucky, they go right back into prison without their child, right? If they have a C-section, then probably 2 days, if they're lucky, and they go right back into being incarcerated without their child. Oftentimes, we don't think about those complications that happen. Some of the things that we had to do was, for example, take the commissary list and think about nutrition for pregnant people and say, okay, well, if you order this thing and this will help you to meet your nutritional needs as a pregnant person. That's stuff that people don't think about. So I did that for 2 years. I loved it. And I was doing that voluntarily. I still was working full time. I think one of my jobs was at a recruitment space. One job was another medical space. I was just doing a lot. I had a lot of young energy. But finally, after my own complications with fibroids and surgeries, I decided I wanted to move. I moved to San Diego, and I was really excited to move to San Diego because in San Diego, they have a more robust doula community. And this is around 2017, 2018. And even at that time, doulas were still kind of unknown, kind of underground. A lot of people had not heard about us yet. There was maybe a couple of hospital programs that were promoting doulas. but we still were kind of this unknown thing. But when I moved to San Diego, we were like an accessory, if that makes sense, like literally like a purse. It's like anyone who had money who was pregnant was like, I have a doula. Like that was the thing. And so I was like, I'm going to come to San Diego. It's beautiful here. I don't have to drive through the snow anymore to get to my clients. It's going to be great. Then I realized like, oh, I'm Black in San Diego. Like that's going to make this a little bit different. So what I experienced as a Black person in San Diego and doing this work was that a lot of times people were offering me free work, or they were offering me, when I say free, like people couldn't afford it. So they would say like, oh, I have this client who can't afford it. Can you take it? And some of these doulas were like doulas who were making six figures, doulas who were well known in the community. But it was like a trend. It was like, oh, you're about reproductive justice. You're about activism. You're that doula in our community. You must want to do all this free work. And I was like, actually, I don't. Like, I want to. Like, I want to help people, but I have bills to pay too. So within a year, I opened up my nonprofit for the village, which is still in San Diego. We service about 100 to 150 people a year with doula services. And I just really started to honestly have a lot of mental breakdowns over the work. Because it was like my heart was focused on this mission of helping birthing people, but it just didn't seem like it was financially feasible. And it kind of created that split, right? That I think a lot of doulas experience in your spirit, where you're like, there's purpose and then there's like capitalism. Like, right? Like, how far do I go with this? So I decided to do things. I increased my pricing. I created my nonprofit to make sure that anyone who was low income or couldn't afford doula services could come to my nonprofit and get services, and our doulas were getting paid. And I created these kind of like different things. And the industry at that time, I was getting approached from different doula trainers who were like, hey, come train with us. Like, basically become part of our like doula gang, right? Become like blank certified doula or whatever. And so I was excited because I was so fresh. So I was like, yeah, let me go see about this program or see about that program. And as I would look through like their websites or their syllabus or whatever it was, I did not see reflections of myself. I was like, I'm Black, I'm queer, like I have all these identities and I'm kinky. Like I see all these, I don't see myself here. So why am I going to certify or, put my money into something, which I ain't had no money for real. Like I was like, why am I going to put my money into something that doesn't show who I am? So 2019, I created my organization, Birthing Advocacy Doula Trainings, and we're popping, like not for nothing. Baddies, y'all know. But I created it because I was like, I want to see people of color. I want to see marginalized communities centered in the training instead of othered. So some trainings that I at the time would say like, I don't know, literally there'd be trainings I would say like birthing, pregnant women, right? Always women are this and the other. And then they would have like a paragraph about Black people. And they would like, and Black people, sometimes they don't breastfeed because of their history. But it was like, there's no way that you can put one culture or one type of person into a paragraph and then tell doulas that you're now qualified to work with this community. Like, I wasn't hearing that. And so I was like, So I created BDT. I created this virtual training because I wanted to be accessible. I wanted people to be able to do it from home. I wanted stay-at-home, parents or parents who are working to be able to access it, look at the recordings at nighttime, or if you're disabled, for you to be able to watch it on your own time. I cursed a lot, so I wanted to be able to like be myself, and I wanted to be able to just like show like we can do this work and we can do it in a way that feels true to ourselves, so that like spirit is not always feeling split around this work. So at that time, again, in the industry, it kind of felt like, when I think back on it, it felt like a time where, especially in 2020, when COVID became what it became, doulas became very much more well-known because people were now having these questions around, can I even bring my partner into the hospital? And how much education do I need to have? And can I have someone on the phone, at least that can kind of help me navigate through this? And doulas weren't being accepted in the hospital. So that was another thing. And it was a bunch of chaos. But I felt also in 2020, like that also pushed this knowledge of doulas to the forefront. So I say all that to say is that I've always wanted to see doulas at the forefront. I've always wanted people to know about the work that we've done or work that we do, and that our work is not new, right? This is historical. This is ancestral. This is like what we've been doing, especially in communities of color. But now the industry is changing, and there's some ways that I feel excited, and there's some ways where I feel a big struggle. And I think it's important to name that. So where we are now in 2024, now we are in this big push for Medicaid reimbursement for doulas. And in one way, right, the beauty of it is that people who have Medicaid in certain states are now able to get doula care for free. And we want people who are on Medicaid, because those are usually people with, more marginalized identities, who need more support, who are in, hospital systems that are and doctors who are probably overwhelmed with patients that don't have time to sit with them and educate them. So that's like number one. We want that community and anyone to have doula care and doula access. Then we get to the struggle part of this kind of industry shift. Where do I even start? The number one thing that I would say has been a conversation across many states. So right now we probably have about 15 to 16 states, I believe, and it's growing, so I can be incorrect with that number, that are now providing Medicaid reimbursement for doulas. One of the first things that I would say is that the reimbursement rates historically have been too low. In California, when we started the conversation about 2 or 3 years ago, where my nonprofit is based, they want us to pay doulas $450 for like 8 sessions at someone's home, plus attending a birth. And if you've never attended a birth, I will tell you that a birth can be 2 hours, and that's usually a precipitous birth, which means like a really fast birth. Or it can be 3 days, right? There's no way to tell what's going to happen, right? So thinking about $450, 8 prenatal sessions, which usually range for 2 to 3 hours. Like if we broke that down into just like an hourly rate, it would be abysmal, right? It would be nothing. Now California is at $2,000, maybe about around $2,500. But we have other states who are still struggling around just the reimbursement rate. So then we have that. Second thing that we have that is also an issue is how to become Medicaid qualified or become a Medicaid provider. So it is not an easy process. It is not something that is automatic. What we're seeing across these states are pretty much like 2 to 3 different pathways. One is like you're certified through an organization. 2 is sometimes they have like some kind of mix of certification and kind of like you've been doing this work for a while. But in that third pathway, if it's a third pathway, is like a legacy pathway. So that means you've been doing this work for a while. You can get proof that you've done 5 births, however many births, whatever it looks like. That proof is usually in the form of a client has to therefore sign off saying that you did this birth. And even in California, at one point, we had to kind of fight for and advocate, hey, we can't get a nurse or a doctor to sign off on this because they're doing too much. Like, we're not part of their team. We don't work for the hospital, so why would they want to sign off on these papers, right? So along with the fact that now doulas have to get insurance, it's mandated usually to become a Medicaid provider, meaning that cost is usually about $400 to $600 that you have to pay at one time. There is no monthly payment process to cover yourself in that way. CPR training, which is not bad. I don't think CPR training is bad, so I want to say that. But it's another cost. and other different requirements that are needed. So what we're seeing in our industry is that people that have been doing doula work for 10 years, 20 years, 2 years, however long it is, they are unable to become Medicaid reimbursed because they cannot afford to get through all the things that is needed to get there. And we're also seeing where, because of these additional costs, right? So we're talking about CPR. Let's say that's $100, maybe a little bit more to move through a CPR course. Then you have liability insurance, $400 to $600, a one-time fee all at once. If you have to get trained, then you have to pay for that. That we're just seeing that people are not able to move through this process to become Medicaid reimbursed doulas. Then becomes another issue. There's a lot of things. I'm saying a lot, but it all matters. When I talk about that part around being certified, so doulas do not have a certifying body. So what I mean by that is that nurses, for example, rightfully so, have a certifying body. They have to go through testing. They have to do things to make sure that they don't kill our asses when we're coming in for care. And we also know that sometimes they still kill our asses when we come to them for care, right? However, doulas don't have that because we are non-medical. So when I say we're non-medical, we're not giving vaginal exams. We're not delivering babies. We're not doing things that are considered to be medical. However, because Medicaid is in the Western model of, Western medicalized, industrialized medical system, we're now trying to fit a square into a circle, right? So we're saying like, hey, doulas, you have to be certified with specific organizations in some states, which can become another thing. Because a lot of doulas who do choose to go through a doula organization like my own at BADT, they pick it based on their own morals, their own values, their own, like I said, wanting to see myself in the training. So sometimes as doulas are moving through this process, they realize that the school that they went to or the organization that they want to go to is not even on that list. And the organization that may be on that list is out of their price, right, what they can afford, or maybe it's just not in alignment with their values. And so with all these complications, it's just like I feel and see that people are really having doulas, are really having a hard time deciding, like, do I continue this work? Is it worth it for me to do this? Should I just certify with these people, even though I feel like I might be literally like traumatized in the process of learning in a way or learning in a system that doesn't see me? And it's a lot of like questions that are going around when really the focus should be, or what we would like the focus would be, is to how do we build a structure that even if we're going to do Medicaid reimbursement, that supports the doulas as well, so they can support the clients that they want to support. So it's in a way, like I said, I want to hold that there's that beauty of being able to give people who are low income, who are in need, this service, but there's not enough talked about how hard it is for that doula to move through that system. Another part that's coming up, and it's probably the biggest issue, especially because in certain states, we probably have, like, I think California has been doing Medicaid for about 2 years now. There may be other places that haven't been doing it for longer. But when we talk about that reimbursement amount, whether we're talking about it's low or it's high, it's taking people months to get that reimbursement rate or to get their actual check. Because the way that Medicaid moves, right, if we're thinking about a doctor who works in a hospital, they're seeing clients back to back, whatever the case is. It's an everyday function. They're getting checks, every day, or money deposited every day. But Medicaid generally works on a slower pace. So if I was working with a private client, I would say, pay me this much money all at once or pay me this monthly. When you're working with Medicaid, you're now working with a system that moves at the pace of a snail. It just does. Everyone knows that. So doulas are, let's say, seeing a client and attending their birth in March, doing all their, postpartum visits, prenatal visits, whatever it may be. They're putting in that information, which has to be kind of like a medical billing and coding thing, which is like, we're not trained medical billing or coders, most of us. But they don't actually get a check for another 3 months. So I don't know about y'all, But most of us, if we didn't get paid for a service that we did, that we committed hours and hours of energy, time, resource into, and we didn't get paid for 3 months, we might be homeless. Like most Americans, from what I know, are one check away from being homeless, right? So now we're talking about not being able to have your money within a decent amount of time. So we're just seeing this escalation of, yes, there's this beauty in being able to care for the people that we want to care for. But man, is it fucking hard to move through this system. And for people, especially like BIPOC folks who have historically done this work without any money for low rates, doing it in their community, in a way, this could be a gift, right? Like this could be like, hey, you can now continue to do your work for your community and be paid for it. But it's like, is it really a gift? And I think that's the question. And I think that's something that we're all aiming to answer. And it's coming up. We're all still pretty split on it. So some of the things that we would love to see and that we're advocating for, I see it a lot in California because of my nonprofit, but really advocating for putting coalitions together, putting groups together, to explain to the insurance providers, hey, y'all work in a certain way, but if y'all gonna have doulas doing this work and filling these gaps that y'all can't fill, right? Because doulas are being, I don't want to say invited into the medical system, but we are in a way being invited into the medical system because the public is asking for us. And one of the things that I try to tell doulas, a lot of doulas, especially new doulas, they struggle with the confidence of understanding like, but when I go into the hospital system, there's a doctor and there's a midwife and there's a nurse and they have all these years of education, and like, who am I in this space, right? Like, who am I? I'm just this little person. But you're not this little person. You're this person that your client is looking to you for safety. You're this person that is coming to their home and educating them and answering questions that sometimes their doctors don't have time to do, which is not always the doctor's fault. That's how the system was set up, right? When we talk about Black perinatal health disparities, us dying 3 to 4 times that of white working people, Indigenous people being around the same, right? Like we literally are, our worth and our value is way more than we can possibly understand. And I think we're living in a time where in this industry, the medical system is understanding that, and they're saying like, hey, well, let's invite you in. We'll give you reimbursement. We'll give you this thing. We'll give you this shiny object that says like, hey, you can get paid more now, right? Hopefully, or you can be more accessible to the communities that you want to work with. But I do think that we have to start asking the questions of like, if we are invited now because we're doing this work, because we're filling these gaps, then what are you going to do for us? How are you going to make sure that we get paid in a decent amount of time, right? Like every 2 weeks or once a month, or like, how are you going to make sure that the insurers, right? Because different insurance companies, that they all have all the same system. So we're not having to learn 10 different systems on how we bill for a client. When are you going to start to make it so that maybe you can cover the cost of becoming a Medicaid reimbursed doula? How are you going to support us in this function? Because in my belief system, and it's just me, I'm just one person, but I'm a person who has seen this and has been in this industry for a little minute now. We're in a space when we talk about the medical system that there's so much more conversation about racism. There's so much more conversation about disparities. There's so much more conversation about what doctors aren't doing, what nurses aren't doing, and where the gaps are. There's so much, especially because it's 2020. When 2020 came around, I can't tell y'all how many things I was invited to. Let's have an anti-racism talk about this. Let's have a DEI conversation about this. And how do we make our clients feel more safe? And how do we do more trauma-informed care like doulas, right? And so it's like, yes. And now they're like, well, if the doulas can come in, they can fill in these gaps, right? If they come in, then our clients can feel safer. Our clients can feel like they have what they've been asking for. But one, we have to realize that the system was created in a certain way and it's operating in a way that it was created. Like some people may feel a way about that, but literally historically, if we look back, especially into grand midwives, right? Black midwives that were doing this work in our communities, and how licensing became a thing, and how they were thought to be put out to be like the wrong people to do this work, and they were actually taking care of us, and we were doing better. Okay, same thing for Indigenous people, but it's like knowing that the system was created this way, it really is a system that has to change. And when we talk about the system changing, it's like, can it change in its current format? I'm not really sure. Can we knock it down? Sure, right? We have conversations about that. Let's all knock it down. But it's like, what are we going to build? What are we going to build after the fact, right? And so it's like, no, we don't all have the answers, but I want to say to y'all that yes, doulas we are part of an answer. We are part of something that literally we save lives with our education. We save lives with being in a birth room. We save lives in a postpartum space, right? But we're also not going to be the thing that solves the issues in the medical industry. So, I don't know. I feel like in some ways that will make people feel kind of maybe sad about this work. Maybe it'll make us feel kind of pumped up about this work. But my ask in saying this, because I feel like it's like a PSA, my ask in saying this is that I want people to recognize the opportunities that we have. I want people to recognize that they have a voice. As a doula, I'm a doula with no degree, no like formal education, no any of that stuff that's supposed to make you important. But I am important, just like you're important. So it's like if people in the medical industry is looking for us, and it's like state to state, we're having these conversations. More states are becoming open to Medicaid reimbursement for doulas. More states are putting more things forward to get us in those spaces. We have to now start asking for what we need, what we want, what our clients need, what we need to be supported, asking for a better infrastructure. And I think too, like doulas who are multifaceted. I know doulas who are doulas and they're technology people, right? They're tech people, or doulas and they're lawyers, doulas and they're this, right? Like coming up with more innovation, coming up with like, if you see a gap in, I don't know, how the insurers are asking us for invoices and it's all over the place. It's chaotic, right? Like, do you have an answer to that? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity in this space. I think there's a lot of ways that we can use our doula education and use the other things that we know to come into this space and demand what we need. I do believe that everyone should have access to doula care, but I also believe that doulas should have what they need to continue this work in a healthy way. And many of us are brought into this space thinking like, oh, we're doula, so I answer every client that comes to me. I take every call. I'm at birth 24/7. And I want to say that I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. Like, I think doulas are supposed to be healthy. Their bills supposed to be paid. They're supposed to have what they need. They're supposed to have time to have a vacation. They should have time to go to get a massage after a birth. Like, there's all these things that we need. So there's so much opportunity. And I just want us to identify that opportunity. I want us to identify the voice that we have, the pull that we have, and that even though we're being handed these things, right? Like, let's not make like someone offering us a cookie as far as like, here's some reimbursement, be where we stop. Like, we deserve more. We need more. We do so much, and it's being noticed. And so we need to take advantage of that and to make sure that we are holding the system accountable, not only for the reach that they have for clients that need support, but also for the reach they have in supporting us and the work that we do. Thank you for being here. I hope that all these words landed with you. I know it's a lot to absorb, and honestly, we could talk about this for another 4 hours. But on part 2, we're going to answer some questions that was given to me from some newer doulas. And I'm super excited, and I'll see y'all for part 2.